You are well this morning? Welcome to Unity. Today's reading is our last reading on the Beatitudes from the book, The Sermon on the Mount. This has been our book for this series that we are closing today. And today's message is a little bit peculiar. Reading from page 43, "Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you." Those are the words of Jesus, and now the commentary by Emmett Fox. He says, in view of what we know about the essential character of the teaching of Jesus, that the will of God for us is harmony, peace, and joy, and that these things are to be attained by cultivating right thoughts or righteousness, this is a very startling statement. Jesus tells us again and again that it is our Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom, and that the way in which we are to receive it is by cultivating serenity or peace of soul. He says that the peacemakers who do this, praying in meekness, shall obtain prosperity, inherit the earth, have their mourning turned into joy, and that, in fact, whatever they shall ask in the manner of this teaching, God will do. Yet, here we are, told that it is blessed to be persecuted as the result of our right thinking, for that by this means we shall triumph, that it is cause for rejoicing and gladness to be reviled and accused, that the prophets and the great illumined ones suffered these things too. All this is indeed very startling, and it is perfectly correct. Only we have to understand that the source of all of this persecution is none other than our own selves. No outside persecutor, but only our own lower selves. When we find righteousness or right thinking very difficult, when we are very strongly tempted to hold the wrong thoughts about some situation or some person or about ourselves, to give way to fear or anger or despondency, then we are being persecuted. And this for us, an extremely fortunate or blessed condition, for it is in such moments we are really advancing. I'm going to read our affirmation for the day, and then I'll invite you to stand and join me. I completely release any idea that there is anything or anyone out there who can hurt or use me. I am responsible for how I experience the conditions of my life, and I am grateful for this deepening understanding of the truth of my being. I live in God's kingdom, and God's kingdom is always for me. As I embrace this truth, any sense of persecution or victimhood fades away into nothingness, and I celebrate my joy-filled life. Yeah, please stand and let's speak that with conviction. I completely release any idea that there is anything or anyone out there who can hurt or use me. I am responsible for how I experience the conditions of my life, and I am grateful for this deepening understanding of the truth of my being. I live in God's kingdom, and God's kingdom is always for me. As I embrace this truth, any sense of persecution or victimhood fades away into nothingness, and I celebrate my joy-filled life. And so it is.
So it is.
morning, beloveds. Oh, happy day. It's a good day in the mind of God, isn't it? Believe it or not, every day is a good day in the mind of God. Even those days when things might be seeming to go sideways for you. Can that be a good day in the mind of God? What? But I live and move and breathe and have my being in that presence. It is calling me forth to a greater something, a greater beingness. And even in the face of things that might appear to be not life-affirming, somewhere in there they are. I promise you. In fact, for the last 8 weeks, we've been looking at some promises that Jesus made to us, haven't we? We've been looking at the Beatitudes, and the Beatitudes are a set of behaviors or characteristics or ways that we can be in the world that if we embody those, there is a promise. There is a promise made to us that we will live richer, fuller lives, that we will see God, that we will see the kingdom of heaven, that we will be filled. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. We talked about depending only on God. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. That is, we have to get comfortable with discomfort to be on the spiritual path. Yes? Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. In other words, we must be open and teachable. If we are open and teachable, we will inherit the earth. We will inherit the kingdom of heaven that is existing right here and right now. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. And we talked about how righteousness means right thinking. If we hunger and thirst after right thinking, we shall be filled with the Spirit of all life. And imagine what your life might be if you were filled with the Spirit of the infinite life of God. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. That's pretty straightforward, yeah? Be merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And this is where we talked about seeing with our spiritual vision, seeing the good, seeing the God in all things, using our spiritual eyes to see truth. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. That is, as we make peace with ourselves and with others, we will be known as the inheritors of God's DNA. Like, how cool is that? I want God's DNA. What? I am God's DNA. I already am. And the more that I embody these behaviors and these characteristics and these ways of being in the world, the more that I can express that divine Godness as I walk this human experience that we call life and have an oh, happy day. And another oh, happy day. And another, oh, happy day. So what is this thing about persecution, though? Really? That doesn't seem to fit. Have you ever felt like a victim? Have you ever felt persecuted by circumstances or people or situations, things going on? Maybe the IRS has persecuted you in the past. Perhaps you feel victimized by parents, by coworkers, by some situation, something that's going on in your life. I know that I have. And there have been times in my life that I've embodied a story of persecution and victimization, and I've identified with that as the small t truth of my being. And where do you suppose that got me? Remember right thinking? That was week 4 of this series. The universe says yes. And as I identified more and more fully with victim, with used, with persecuted, what did I get? The universe said, yes, that's right, that's true of you. You are a victim, you are persecuted, you are used. I had to shift myself out of that victim thinking and recognize that nothing and no one is against me, and then practice that, which is, God, I gotta practice now, are you kidding? Can't I just say it once and it's done? Let me put it to you this way. How many years did you practice being a victim? So it might take a little bit of practice to undo that. There are 2 ways that we find ourselves perhaps feeling persecuted on the spiritual path. And the first way, or as far as I can see anyway, the first one is that I victimize myself with my wrong thinking. right? And I start to wake up, and then I realize I'm victimizing myself with my wrong thinking, and then I beat myself up for thinking wrong, and I'm victimizing myself with my wrong thinking. What? Which is just perpetuating the cycle, right? But as I am pondering the things that are not working about my life, and the universe says, yes, I am victimizing myself by placing myself in a position over and over and over again of experiencing not what I want to, or not what I say I want to experience. There's a second way, though, that has certainly, maybe not all of you will have this experience, but I have had this experience. As I began to wake up to the spiritual truth of who I was, I found myself kicked out of my family. Not forever, only for a few years. But you see, I felt victimized by that, right? And I saw myself as being picked on and victimized by people that I thought would love and support me no matter what. Have you found as you begin to change and you begin to stand more upright in the spiritual truth of who you are, some people just kind of at you? Or they don't want to spend time with you anymore because you don't agree with their story of victimization? Has that happened to you? That's happened to me. And you see, then I can own that as me being victimized by them. Which, of course, I did. Does that make sense? I had to make it about them and how bad they are. And then, you know what? How can reconciliation and peace ever come out of that? How can I be a peacemaker, remember? We talk about being a peacemaker, not a peace dreamer, not a peace wisher, but a peacemaker. How can I ever make peace with that situation in my family if I'm blaming and holding them as wrong and feeling victimized by them? There will never be a healing. There will never be a healing. There will always be this. And I have to tell you, it's our job as the people on the conscious spiritual path, it is our job to stand up for godness. It is our job to stand up for goodness. It is our job to simply say, no more. We're not playing that game. We're not doing that anymore. We don't blame, we don't shame, we don't guilt. We simply allow. Did you think that was your job when you came to church this morning? Yeah, I feel going, sure, I'm busy. I can't make it next week. But you see, for righteousness' sake, 5 weeks ago, righteousness, right thinking, that is all righteousness is. For righteousness' sake, for the sake of being on the conscious spiritual path, for the sake of being happy, I can embrace right thinking, embrace love, love as Jesus told me to love, which was unconditionally, no matter what. Unconditionally, no matter what. And recognize that as I'm healing, healing brings up everything unlike itself. We talked about this, I think, just briefly last week or the week before, where if you have a glass of water with a lot of mud in the bottom and then it's half full of water, if you pour more water in, cool, clear water, what happens to the mud? Stirs up, right? But if you keep pouring the cool, clear waters of consciousness into the glass of your life, the mud stirs up and you're, oh, this is so uncomfortable, I'm feeling persecuted. It's for righteousness' sake. And we simply allow all of that seems unclean and all that seems impure to tumble over the side of the glass until the glass is filled with pure water. Would you like that? I know I would. So, this talk is not called Order in the Court. This talk is called Victim or Victory. And here's how Order in the Court got up there. I made a mistake. What? I gave Monica the wrong information, and she ran with it, which is her job. She's supposed to run with what I give her, right? She's so good at that, thank you. And it wasn't until this morning that I noticed on our materials, and I'm the one who did it. And for the sake of right thinking, I refuse to blame myself for that. Yay! cute. You made a mistake. Oh well, it's going to fit right into the message. Because the name of this message actually is Victim or Victory. Victim or Victory. See, I could victimize myself about that mistake, couldn't I? Or I can stand in victory, in the consciousness of love for self and others. Knowing that in this human experience of life, sometimes mistakes happen. And just find myself absolutely adorable. Isn't that cute? Because, it's really a small thing, isn't it? And not only is it a small thing, it's a perfect thing. Do you see how the universe uses everything for good? Because I wouldn't have been able to talk about that. I could be a victim or I can stand in victory. And you guys know how I like to look up words in the dictionary, right? I was sure when I went to look up these two words in the dictionary this week that I was going to find something really interesting about how they're connected. They are not in the least related in any way. These two words seem like they would be connected, don't they? But they're not. They are not related in any way. They come from two different roots, which is interesting. Two different ways of being in the world. And so as healing is bringing up everything unlike itself, I can continue to stand in a consciousness and an attitude of victory. I am the ruler of my life. I declare truth as me. I live in the conscious oneness with the infinite universe. And somewhere, there is a great message called order in the court. And one Sunday it's going to come out. So as we think about victim or victory, as we think about, do we want to walk through life as victims or do we want to walk through life as victors? Recognizing the spiritual truth of ourselves, three words kind of came to mind for me, for us to really consider. These are victory words. And these words are opportunity, influence, and commitment. Ways that we might find ourselves feeling persecuted, or ways that we might find ourselves feeling as though we are victors in life. Opportunity, influence, and commitment. So let's talk briefly about opportunity. Life's challenges are opportunities that grow me, or barriers that stop me. Now, if I'm walking life in victory, and I run into a challenge, what might I call it? It's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to open more fully to a part of me I may not know very well yet. And if I ran into that challenge, I promise you it's there for a reason. There is something it has to teach me. Or I can look at barriers, at challenges as barriers or walls that stop me. I thought it was an apocryphal story, but as it turns out, it's true. Edison, the inventor of the light bulb, he said he had over 10,000 tries before he finally got a light bulb that worked. 10,000. I don't know about you, I might have been ready to pack my bag and go home. 10,000 tries. And you know what he said about it? I have not failed. I have not failed. I have found 10,000 ways it does not work. Now that's a victor. His challenge, he did not see light bulb after light bulb after light bulb try not working. He did not see that as a barrier. People come to me all the time, well, I've tried, and it just isn't working out, so it must be God's way of saying, it's not mine. What? 10,000 light bulbs, you guys. If Thomas Alva Edison had said, you know what, I've tried 9,999 times, and it doesn't work, so it must not be meant to be. There must not meant to be electric light. I give up. Somebody else would have done it, right? But it wouldn't have been him. And he would not have been the victor of his own life, his own call to create something that changed humanity. Yes? Now, we might argue about whether it changed humanity for good or ill, but that's an interesting conversation. But here's a man who made a difference in the world. Think to these Beatitudes we've been talking about. Remember, there's a behavior, a characteristic, and a promise. He was poor in spirit, wasn't he? Remember, poor in spirit means to be teachable, to be open. He was open. He was teachable. And he had an awakening, and he allowed it to happen. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. When we depend only on God, when we allow ourselves to be open and teachable, the kingdom of heaven is ours. He was meek. He was gentle and humble about it, wasn't he? He didn't say, oh, I'm mad at those light bulbs. He said, I found 10,000 ways it doesn't work. He was humble, and he was available to the greater idea. Are you available to the greater idea? Or are you seeing yourself as persecuted when things don't work out? Or victimized, or receiving a message of, well, that inspiration you had wasn't really real. Don't follow your heart. See, and then I begin to victimize others out of my sense of loss and frustration and fear, and things aren't adding up for me. Does that make sense to you? We begin to victimize others because of our own pain, rather than continuing to pour those cool, clear waters of life into the glass and allowing it to get stirred up and flow over. Make the 10,000 and first try. So opportunity, are you ready to stand in life as an opportunity? Even the things that feel like challenges or hard or bad, or the things that might be persecuting you. If you have been persecuted by the IRS, what was the opportunity for learning? Right? If you have been victimized by someone, and we want to take that seriously. We don't deny the experience of victimization, but we also look at the healing. What is it for? What is its purpose? How am I called to heal? What am I called to know and embody more fully out of this experience? It's an opportunity, not a barrier. So opportunity is the first word. The second word I invite you to think about in this area of victim or victory is influence. Influence. And what I'm thinking about here is, what do I actually have control over? Right? I mean, in this human experience of life, ultimately, all we really have control over is how we experience things, not what we experience. How many of you had a not great experience with all this smoke from the forest fires? That was a really difficult few days for me. Really difficult. And I have no control over whether there's smoke in the air or not. What I can influence, what I have control over, is how I am in the midst of it. How I choose to behave, how I choose to respond, how I choose to be present or not present to what's going on. Where do I have influence or power or control, and where do I not? And know those boundaries really clearly. And where you don't, I have no control over the fact that it says something wrong up there. The mistake's already been made. I have no influence, no power, no control to make it different right now. And even if I did, I probably wouldn't, because it doesn't matter. I have to stand in my peace, know what I can influence, what I can control, what I can change, and what I cannot. And adopt a happy attitude. Oh, happy day. Oh, happy day. It's up to me. I get to choose. I was reminded, thinking about this week, of Nelson Mandela when he left prison. You remember what he said? He said that as he was walking toward the gate that would set him free, he said he knew that if he didn't leave, he said, I'll say the way he said it, if I didn't leave my bitterness and hate behind, I would still be in prison. Now that man was victimized and persecuted. We can make a really good case for that, right? He was in prison for years unjustly. And I don't mean prison like I mean bad prison. And as he was leaving, he took a moment to reflect on what he could influence, what he had power over, what he could control. And he said, if I don't leave the hate and the bitterness behind me, I am still in prison. Are you imprisoning yourself by holding on to something? Or are you standing in the learning opportunity, reminding yourself what you can change and what you can't, and standing in your power today? It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because the third word that I was thinking about this week is commitment. What are you really committed to? What was Nelson Mandela really committed to? He was committed to healing in South Africa. He was committed to something greater than his persecution. He was committed to a bigger idea of love and peace. And because of that commitment, he was able to ask himself that question as he left prison. What is going to serve me as I leave this place? What is going to call me into a greater beingness so that I can be about the bigger idea, not just for my life, but for an entire people and for all of South Africa? He was committed to something greater than he was. And you think about Thomas Edison. He was committed to something greater than he was, wasn't he? He was committed to an idea of creating artificial light for humanity. What are you committed to? Your victimhood, your story, your pain, your loss? Are you committed to happiness and joy, peace for all humankind? A happy day? Big heart, loving as Jesus told us to love unconditionally. What are you committed to? You see, these Beatitudes are all about, if we've done all of these things, we may find ourselves persecuted either by ourselves or by those around us. But will we stand for the bigger idea? Will we stand for the idea of love and perfection and wholeness and the allness of God showing itself forth as us? Will we stand for planetary healing? Will we stand for expanding the consciousness of ourselves and of those around us? Will we stand for a greater idea? What are you committed to? And you know what you're committed to by what you do in the world. Oh boy, I hate that part. Remember last week we talked about being peacemakers, and we talked about some of the ways that maybe we don't make peace. If we're doing those things, we're not committed to being peacemakers, right? What we do in the world will tell us what we're committed to. What I do in the world tells me what I'm committed to. If I'm committed to a bigger idea, then I spend my time being about the bigger idea. If I'm committed to smallness and pettiness, I spend my time being small and petty. Most of us are somewhere in between. In this community, I want us to be about the big idea. The big idea. I want us to be about treasuring one another, about treasuring our teachings, about treasuring the commitment to spiritual growth. I want us to see our challenges as opportunities. I want us to see the seeming barriers as places that we can learn and grow. I want us to use our influence to expand this teaching in the world and to improve our own experience of life. I want us to be committed to these things. Are you with me? Shall we be about the bigness and the allness of God expressing perfectly as Unity of Bellevue and as each one of us? Shall we be about practicing these ways of being in the world so that we can live into God's promise for our lives? So let's turn within and practice just a little bit right now. I invite you to take the sacred breath with me. Simply allow your shoulders to drop as you settle into your chair. And opening your heart and your mind more fully than you ever have before. Make yourself available to the divine idea. Allow yourself to be available to the infinite mind and heart of God as you. Know that there can be no separation. There can be no God and. There is only God as you right here and right now. And all that is known to the mind of God is known to you. All that is known in the heart of God is known to you right here and right now, for you cannot be separated from the infinite one, the living one of your being. And simply breathing into this awareness. Allow yourself to begin to pry open any feelings of victim, of persecuted, of used, of hurt. And take a sensible look. How has this belief, how has this practice of victim been a barrier in your life, been a barrier to you experiencing your infinite good? Anchor right here and now in the infinite love that Jesus taught, unconditional love for yourself and for this condition, this experience. And begin to say yes to the bigger idea. This is an opportunity for me. It is an opportunity for me to learn and grow, to move from victim to victor, to move from victim to victory, to move from small and petty to big in the mind and heart of God. And just allow it to tell you one thing you are to learn. Just ask this experience, what is one thing you are here to teach me? And listen with an open heart. And embrace the awareness of this thing. And become committed. Become committed to embodying and learning all it is here to teach you, so that you may go forth in the world at one with the infinite mind, aware, at peace, humble and teachable, merciful, open-hearted and loving. And begin to see yourself in this new experience of life, confident and clear. Walking as a victor, walking in God. And so knowing that we have been transformed this day by the renewing of our minds, I declare we are happy, we are joyful, we are at peace. We are present to the infinite life that wants only to be known, wants only to be lived, only to be embraced. And so I close this message grateful, grateful, grateful for the awakening, for the renewal, and for all the good that must come of it. And so it is.